One of the most common MAGA talking points about Kamala Harris that you've probably heard is taking a hard fall today. Trump has been arguing that she wasn't doing any or enough press interviews. And you'll remember when she first stepped up as the nominee, it was a frenetic stretch. Well, the harder they come, the harder they fall, one and all, as Jimmy Cliff famously put it. Respect. Because that would apply right now. This MAGA talking point is taking a hard fall as Harris steps up to journalistic interviews while Trump ducks them, like on 60 Minutes. And Harris also leading a media blitz this week from classic forums like The View, haven't seen Trump on there recently, to Howard Stern, which I'll get to in a minute, to these new media podcasts where she's engaging with different independent media hosts and their sometimes younger audiences. These are the mainstream outlets which many campaigns court. And Harris is using them to, of course, take the hard questions sometimes, also get her message out. She talked a range of policy and took the questions again on the forum that most nominees usually go to, both party nominees. But these are the kind of questions that this cycle, she is the only nominee answering on 60 Minutes.
So what kind of gun do you own, and when and why did you get it?
I have a Glock.
Was it a mistake to loosen the immigration policies as much as you did?
It's a long-standing problem, and solutions are at hand.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's some of the back and forth. The interview ran about 20 minutes. Again, Trump was not there. Those would be fair questions for him as well. How are you going to get something through Congress? This Congress, which has had multiple Republican speakers, has not been super effective in terms of passing a lot of domestic legislation. I don't say that as a burn, just an observation. So that's just some of this playing out on 60 Minutes. But there's also a larger dynamic. If this were a one-off about one show, even a great classic, well-watched news show like 60 Minutes, you might say, okay, the candidate has an issue with that show. Let's not make a whole meal out of it. But I'm going to show you the evidence that there is a whole meal here, even if some of the ingredients are toxic and people have to make up their own mind about what they want to ingest. The information we ingest can be as damaging as other things we put in our body. But the theme here is something I told you about last night. It's bigger than 60 Minutes or any single show. We are seeing Donald Trump run and duck from any place where he thinks he might be held accountable or fact-checked in real time. And that includes places he used to go all the time. Which brings us to the shock jock himself, although he's evolved over the years, Howard Stern. What does Howard Stern have in common with a venerated news magazine show like 60 Minutes? Well, they're both places that were Trump's stomping grounds. Remember, Trump previously went on 60 Minutes and did it last cycle, and we mentioned that. Trump and Stern go back many years. This is actually a picture of then the shock jock and then the real estate magnate, or pretend magnate, depending on which financials you believe, together at one of Trump's weddings, his first. Donald Trump has gone on Howard Stern's show dozens of times. Politico has a whole breakdown on that. So this is exactly the kind of thing that Donald Trump would use on his way up, if you want to call it that. And he used to be able to handle questions from Howard Stern about a whole range of topics. Now what we have is Kamala Harris going on Howard Stern and Donald Trump running away. So his only interviews this week have been on Fox and on a conservative radio show where he thought he would get a certain type of treatment. On Howard Stern, again, like 60 Minutes, a big platform that reaches millions, and not all of them are automatically Biden-Harris administration supporters. Kamala Harris used this interview while Trump runs and hides to discuss her approach, why she's engaging these different forums, and also put it in the context of what I told you is larger than just beef with one show. The larger theme, which you and I may know about and people who follow the news may know about, but in October, as other people tune in, the fact that Donald Trump has a problem with the courts, independent journalism, and any other independent power structure that might hold him accountable, which raises questions about what his second term would be like.
He says he's going to be a dictator on day one. Understand what dictators do. They jail journalists. They put people who are protesting in the street in jail.
He said he thinks he wants to go after Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian. He wants to go after Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers.
Donald.
Now, if Jimmy Kimmel's not safe, who's safe? It would be a laughing matter, except it isn't. Because those instincts, which Donald Trump is not disavowing, the guy's literally running for president. If you believe these state polls, he seems tied. And even in that context, where the political benefits might run the other way, he still has to blurt out dictator for some of the time, abuse of power some of the time, prosecute his enemies maybe. So this is serious stuff. Harris is using this broad swath of different approaches, forums, and media to reach people. That includes the journalistic outlets which do fact check. It includes these radio shows that Trump used to go on when he wasn't running scared. While Trump is burrowing deeper into what you might call his own self-imposed content tunnel. The candidate who, as I reminded you at the top of the show, accused his opponent of ducking hard questions is the one actually avoiding all the hard questions, whether that's from Howard Stern or 60 Minutes, and then seeking refuge on Fox. The harder they fall. Fox is an outlet which broadcasts so many proven election lies that after Donald Trump's loss in 2020, it broadcast those lies and then had to pay a record defamation penalty. So this is not exactly a 60 Minutes level interview here, or even a shock jock interview. Historically, this has been a safe space for MAGA snowflakes. Their term, not ours. But the defamation penalty was so costly that I can show you tonight how this is even changing things over there. Even MAGA allied hosts are doing some fact checking of Trump in real time. So to set up what I'm about to show you, I want to just show a basic fact. Amidst these terrible hurricanes and all the risk we are facing, Kamala Harris visited North Carolina yesterday. Now, that's not a big deal one way or the other. It's what you might expect a sitting vice president and major party nominee to do. I can tell you both candidates, Trump and Harris, have been talking about these threats and have visited some of the affected areas, although on the facts they have a different approach. But that public observable fact is known. So when Donald Trump went on Fox lying and claiming the opposite about Harris, Laura Ingraham corrected him in front of the Fox audience.
But she shouldn't be there anyway. She should be, I would say, North Carolina is bad, is so bad. And
she was there today for 3 hours, I believe, Kamala Harris.
Now, that is not how many Fox evening hosts handled Trump's election lies last campaign season. It is a shift. And notice it comes amidst what I'm telling you about, Trump running away from these other forums I mentioned because of fact-checking, because any adversarial effort to hold him accountable is something that right now he would rather avoid and run from, even if it squares the circle and shreds his own talking points about the other team doing the thing he's doing. The point I'm exploring here with you tonight is not chiefly about ideology or partisanship, not about whether people vote for one party or the other, which is a rich tradition in our country, and you should do your homework and vote for whoever you choose. I'm not speaking in partisanship, which comes up plenty in campaigns. I'm speaking about a deeper fault line, which I also reported on last night. It's a fault line over facts right now. The MAGA GOP increasingly uses lies as a litmus test. You have to support the lies for Trump to be in good standing with the party. And Trump awaits a federal trial about election fraud and coup lies. And when a political party wields lies and propaganda for power, it does not usually stay neatly contained to just some lies for the leader or just one topic. Those are the kind of rationalizations we've heard, even right here on this desk, from some Trump allies or former allies. The lies and disinfo, for example, are spreading now to the federal government's response to Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, which is barreling towards Florida, and they have consequences. Emergency response officials say the misinformation is confusing residents who could be in danger. There are echoes here of what it was like when Donald Trump was president. You remember the COVID response, the many lies, the disinformation, the bleach. People have memory hold that, but that matters. That's the person in charge, how they wield the awesome authority they have in office. Bob Woodward now revealing new scoops about Trump sending COVID tests to Putin's regime back then. There's echoes of then-President Trump doing the disinfo he did in real time when he infamously doctored a hurricane map with a Sharpie. The mayor of Tampa, which is in the hurricane path, is not making a political or campaign point today, but in a preview of what could be a more serious problem if Trump were reelected, pleading with residents to please, for your own safety, focus on the facts from the credible sources, including emergency responders, not political propaganda designed to gain power, even if it endangers your life.
Please don't get political on this. This storm is going to affect everybody, and we are getting the help that we need from all of the different governmental officials. Hate to break it to you, but a lot of what you see on social media is not factual. Stick with the facts.
Stick with the facts. And those kinds of officials and authorities generally avoid going further to stir up even more partisanship by saying they're responding to MAGA lies or Donald Trump. They're trying to do this in as clear and straightforward a way as possible. But honoring those facts sometimes does require being clear with the public, clear with you about who's doing the lying. This is not a drill. This is not a movie where we imagine a hurricane or a pandemic or foreign policy issues that turn on life and death outcomes to illustrate what we need. This is really happening. I've told you before, politics is often too important to be left to politicians. Tonight I will update that with something else that is basic, but sometimes I share with you basic, straightforward things and repeat them. The truth is way too important to be left up to political liars who do not seem to care whether you, the public, live or die.